Welcome to the Pennywise Financial Podcast. This is Constantine here at Monarch Wealth Management with my co-host today, Dave Georgiev. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Cons. Today we have a special guest, our dear friend and founder of Young & Company, Mr. Dave Young. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here today.
Absolutely. So we are entering into tax season, which for anybody that knows a CPA, knows that this time of year gets brutal, absolutely brutal. If you are married to or related to a CPA, you do not see them for a couple months. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, we're going to be going underground, much like the groundhog here. Coming up soon, we will
better not see a shadow.
Do you
see your shadows?
No taxes. Nothing but taxes for the next couple of months at least. And then even then, those will be extensions. But right now, we are just start kicking off tax season, getting ready to take care of clients and reduce people's tax liabilities where possible.
Absolutely. Dave, I got a quick question for you. What percentage of people that you file for, whether it be corporate or individuals, file for an extension?
I would say a fair number of the business clients will file for extension if a lot of times they have to wrap up some of their bookkeeping, some things, there's some ambiguities. You want to make sure it's clear and correct. You have a good tax filing. So if there's anything that's, say, nebulous, you want to make sure it's correct. And sometimes the best thing to do is get it on extension because the business returns will issue out K-1s. So not only if you have to amend, not only will affect that business return, but all the shareholders or partners. So whatever that filing is, let's say there's 4 or 5 partners, you want to make sure that return is correct because if you have to correct that base return, then you got to correct 4 or 5 other individual returns.
That sounds like fun.
So you want to make sure that's correct. So if everything is good and correct and comes to us, we do our very best to get it out on time, but you want to make sure the filing is done correctly. And right now, there's talk of a retroactive tax law change, which could impact all the business filers when it comes to depreciation, for example. So until such time that the government can tell us actually what the rules are,
good luck with that.
We want to make sure that we have the returns done, and then we'll see if they're going to actually change the laws retroactively or not.
But there's a shortage of you guys right now, right? CPAs?
Yes, a huge shortage. I sit on the board where I will sit again on the board of New York State Society of CPAs. I was on the board for quite some time, was actually their vice president of chapters for a year. Oh. And I get to see the CPA numbers coming in, and the number of CPAs coming in the pipeline is very low, and the number leaving is very high. It's a very high pressure sort of job to have. And a lot of CPAs are aging out and a lot of them are choosing to hang up, close up their practices and retire. So you have more on the way out than you have on the way in. So it's a significant shortage of CPAs right now.
That's got to be the same in our field too. I feel like the younger generation, they just don't want to do it. It's really hard.
It is hard.
A lot of pressure, a lot of liability. Right.
Nobody wants to work anymore.
And that too.
Yeah. The liability is significant. And you're trying to interpret tax law that really, a lot of folks, it's brand new. Matter of fact, I was actually talking to one of my colleagues. There's probably been more tax law changes from 2017, so relatively recently, till now, than there had been maybe, I've been practicing over 30 years in maybe the 20-something, 25 or 6 years before that, because there's just, the government sees the tax law change as a way to maybe buy votes for congressmen or senators or whatever.
Absolutely.
And they keep changing the law, and they can change the law retroactively. And then a lot of times, to make things even more complicated, you get decoupling when the federal and the state have different sets of rules.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. Like you could have one set of rules for the feds and a different set of rules for the state. And you get a lot of, rule changes and a lot of decoupling, and you have a shortage of CPAs, and you have things get condensed. So for example, what I mean by that is at the end of January, all the W-2s and 1099s should be issued, but you don't always get all of your clients. They have, if they're coming in if they have financial instruments, they're getting K-1s, they're getting 1099 DIBs or consolidated brokerage statements. Those come out later and later every year.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing that doesn't change is the deadline. Right. So the deadline is the deadline.
I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's why I asked about the extensions, because I feel like for a CPA, for your perspective, I mean, even me as an individual, 1099s coming in maybe end of February. Sometimes they get revised, and like second week of March, I'm getting them.
Right.
So if I've already filed, now I have to go do an amendment.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, does that really give you enough time to thoroughly analyze the tax return, to properly prepare? Like, I think the season should be longer. Am I speaking out of turn? I don't know.
No, I agree. It would be nice if it'd be longer, but I think what human nature is, then you just keep. I can then see the people just waiting to the next deadline.
Kicking the can.
So to your point, what we do is we make sure we know who's going to be in that bucket. So we know if we have a client that perpetually they get their information to them. I mean, it's not the client's fault necessarily. They're getting their broker statements late.
That's
Then
what I'm saying.
Those clients,
You have
we
no
do
control over that.
We do tax planning for them, so we know more or less what it should be, and then we do an extension. And when I file that extension, I have them pay in what would be also due for the first quarter for the year, in this case, 24. So we have an extension for 23. We pay in that amount with the extension. So therefore, if there's a refund for 2023, it'll flow into 2024. So oftentimes, if there's complicating issues, like you mentioned, let's say brokerage statements that are changing or K1s and things along those lines, what we tend to do is, put them on extension. I always let the client make the decision, but if it looks like things are coming to last minute, the best thing for the client and the best thing for everybody involved, even the taxing authorities, is to file an extension, because it's more work for even the IRS. Now they have to process an amended return. The client has to pay for an amended return. So if things are getting pushed up against the deadline, now granted, you're working with limited workforce too. So even if you have all the information for all the clients, you can only produce, so many widgets in your factory.
Workforce, you mean
In-
CPAs
Right.
and
Or tax
on the
preparers.
other end, too,
Correct.
right?
Right. Exactly. So
How are they possibly going to be able to go through those returns?
that's a good question. I'd be impressed if they could simply start answering the phones. I mean, at the IRS
Oh, good
level.
luck with that.
Right? So
Hey,
they will penalize you though. So if you if you miss a filing, let's say you have an FBAR, which is a foreign bank account reporting issue, that's a big penalty, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So those are things that you get a penalty on. But so to your point, if you have any inkling of if a person has a foreign bank account, you want to put that person on extension to make sure you capture all their accounts, all their investments that are overseas, because they have to be reported in separately through FinCEN and also on the tax return. So a lot of times people are better off with extensions. I've been married over 30 years and my wife's also CPA. And I would say that probably for most of the years, all the years we've been married, we filed an extension, because it's much better from everyone's perspective. That return's done, let's say in May or June, when the person has a little bit more, all the information, a little bit more time. To your point, now the revised 1099 has been revised. There's no more revisions. The K1s have finally come in, because with the shortage of CPAs, even those places where those clients are getting their K1s from, wherever they are, they're limited too in time. So oftentimes people are actually better off with extensions if they have a complicated return and the information's coming in last.
I think I filed an extension in the last, maybe it's been almost a decade. How about you? Any extensions?
Yeah. Actually, was it last year? 2 years ago.
I
I feel like I tell you every year. Yeah.
Maybe you did.
Yeah.
But that leads us into the next question for you, Dave, is what can people do to prepare themselves when they come in to meet with you?
So here's what I have my clients do. So we have our clients, we give them a checklist, and every year we give them a checklist, and every year it gets revised, because sometimes every year the law is changing, but oftentimes a lot of things are the same. So for example, my clients, we give them a checklist, and on that checklist are things like, hey, we need your driver's license. We need you to make sure you have all your W-2s, your 1099s, and make sure you do a comparison. So you take all your documents for 2023 and compare them to 2022 to make sure you have everything. So, oh boy, I might be missing the one from, XYZ brokerage. I don't have that one. So the client will have to go and download it or get it from their broker, or however they get it. Or maybe they're missing a W-2 to go back to their employer and get it, or a 1099. So for my clients, what I want them to do is make sure they go step by step on my checklist and make sure you have everything on that checklist. And when I interview the client, when they come in, I make sure, hey, here's the checklist. Here's everything you had last year. Here's everything you have this year. So I'm going to double check them. But I want to make sure For sure, when we file that return, it's accurate. We don't want any problems with the IRS or New York State because
No, that's
those
not fun.
entities are very
Yeah.
unforgiving. And even if you're right, you're wrong because you can't get through to them. So you'll send them multiple letters,
Yeah.
multiple filings saying, hey guys, here's the information. This is the third time. And it's just, going to a big black hole. So what the last thing you want to do is send anything inaccurate there because it'll take a lot of time and effort to correct it.
Well, let me ask you, and I've had experience with New York State in probably the last 5 years, almost every year. Get a nice letter from New York State, and I've gotten some maybe 10, 15 years ago from the IRS. You open that envelope and you're like, oh, geez, you see those three
Right.
letters, your heart drops. But if you're doing everything right and you're very diligent in making sure that your numbers are correct, you're reporting all your income and things like that, you really shouldn't be that scared. But what I will say is, and I totally agree with you, is these people just suck. It's a time suck.
It's a time suck.
And you'll
right.
never get that time back. You don't get compensated for
No.
that. Usually you resolve it somehow. Oh, they forgot this, or there was a box, or you need to add a form, or they couldn't find something. But these people that I talk to, most of them put me on hold after I'm done talking to them for a half an hour. They go to try to research it. They don't even know what they're talking about. And this is the person that decides if I owe them money or not.
Yeah. So what I would tell you to do is, and for anyone out there listening, is you can get an account with the IRS. Like you can open up your own account so you can go in and get a transcript. A transcript is simply everything that the IRS sees on you. So oftentimes, especially if I'm dealing with people who may have elderly parents and they don't know if mom and dad have everything, maybe they can get on with their mom and dad and help them get a transcript. And then New York State actually has a pretty good portal themselves. And the CPAs, if you sign a form called the TR 2000, just simply a form.
Is that power of attorney?
It's not power of attorney. It allows the CPA to go on and see your filings with New York State. So if you get a letter from New York State, rather than faxing it in or mailing it in, you or your CPA can go to their portal and then put it in the portal. The advantage of that is you get essentially like some sort of proof that went up there. You get like a little code saying, "Yeah, we got this."
Everything's timestamped with the date. You can see what's
Unlike
going
the
on.
mail, because the other, the postal services, they do their best, but I think, you don't necessarily know if something gets mailed in, did it actually get there? Now, anytime you're doing a mailing with the government, you want to do it registered mail, certified mail, priority mail, so there's tracking. But if you go through the portal, same thing's true with estimated tax payments for if you have an account with the IRS or New York State. If you are making estimated tax payments, you want to make them online because you're going to get a transmittal number. You don't want to just trust the Postal Service will get it there. Then once it gets there, that the IRS will process it and put it on your account. So to the degree you can avoid the mail, do that. To the degree you can avoid even calling them by going online and getting a transcript and trying to resolve things that way. Yes, but the whole name of the game is get a return filed correctly without any errors to avoid any problems with New York or the IRS.
Dave, did the law pass where they added all those IRS agents? Do you remember that? Like a year ago, 2 years ago?
I don't know if it happened.
It did.
And they were supposed to be armed. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
whole controversy? We're like, why?
I'm not sure if they're really armed. I think part of the issue is
Did they take
they're
that pistol
losing a
safety
lot.
course in New York State?
right. Yeah,
Oh.
that's
'Cause
right.
I just took part one.
So for the IRS folks, they're also losing a lot, right? So maybe they bring on 87,000 new people, but remember, every year they're losing a bunch of people that are retiring.
Sure.
So, but what I would tell you is they're going to go after the small business people. They're not going to go after the big businesses because those big businesses, they have the means to defend themselves
Yeah.
but if you're a small business owner
In New York?
good luck. Because you're going to have, you got the double whammy of being in a hostile state and you may not have the means to defend yourself. So part of your defense is making sure you have a buttoned up tax return, that you're compliant with all the rules, that you have a CPA and a lawyer and a financial team in your back pocket that you can count on. Because I don't think any one business owner can know all of those things.
Yeah.
Dave, you
need
just brought me back to like middle school, high school. It's like you want to make sure you have the right buddies to protect yourself from that bully.
right.
And we know who the bullies are.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And part of it is just the common sense. Like, you have a CPA that you have a relationship with, and you have a lawyer and like financial guys like you, the same thing, because right now things are so complicated and they're getting more complicated literally every year. And they're not likely to get less complicated. So they're only going to get more and more complicated, and the penalties will become more and more punitive.
Yeah.
So best thing somebody can do when they prepare for their returns is making sure they go through that checklist.
Correct. Yeah, making sure really you want to make sure you take, and if you don't have a checklist, just look at your last year's tax return and say, okay, I had the W-2 from this employer, that employer, I had 1099s from this brokerage house, from that brokerage house, these K-1s. Use your last year's tax return as your guideline if you don't have a checklist. But I provide a checklist that I give to my clients to make sure they have something to start gathering their stuff in. I usually have them get a folder, put everything in the folder, and then they send me my stuff through our portal, which is a secure portal. So making sure they keep a copy and we have a copy. And so when they come into us, we're not going back and forth. Like they come in, they have all their stuff right there. Get it all to me as quickly as you can, accurately as you can. And, if we have to file an extension, we file an extension. My whole attitude on the extension is it's a good tool one thing I got to remind people, an extension is for time to file, not pay, right? So if you owe the IRS, you can't, every year, I say that every year I get people calling me, I need to file. I don't have the money to pay the IRS. Well, the IRS wants their money. New York wants their money.
Yeah.
But you can file for an extension, but you better send money with it if you owe money. That's kind of my point right there. But,
Okay.
What are some of the nuance? I think of the crypto craze a couple of years ago. When people prepare for taxes, what experience have you had? I mean, are people coming in with big gains and thinking they don't have to pay tax?
So crypto's big point the IRS is looking at right now. So it's a big question right on top of the tax return. They started off, it's like digital assets, like cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
So initially people had cryptocurrency and the IRS didn't know about it, right? They didn't know how to track it. Well, now the IRS is getting really good at tracking all the cryptocurrency transactions, right? So people don't realize though, when you go from a fiat currency, US dollar, you buy something, say Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, that's sort of like, you're buying and selling stocks. So if it's almost like you're buying something you're selling your position in Microsoft or Apple, or you're selling some of your mutual funds to buy something. That's a transaction, a capital
but wait,
transaction.
let me ask you this. If I cross the border, like we used to do as kids in college, and go over to Niagara Falls, and I take a couple $1,000 and now I get the Canadian currency, and that's not a taxable event, right?
Right. It's fiat currency.
But in this case, you're saying that people might not realize, hey, I have $100 in cash in US dollars, and now I want to get Bitcoin. That's like a transaction.
Right. Well, the initial buying of the fiat, from fiat to like buying Bitcoin, and you hold it, that's okay. It's like there's no reporting.
There's no gain yet.
Right. And there's no gain. But where you have the issue is when you sell that position, right? So let's say you bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and then 2 months later you sell some of that to buy something. Now you've got a capital transaction. So where people kind of have to be careful too is where they're housing their, where that money is. So a lot of issues, like when we talk about FINCEN, we talked a little bit earlier about FINCEN, and FINCEN reports all your foreign accounts. So one of the issues with crypto is you got to make sure that crypto is housed here, like if it's US based, right? Because you could have, you could have two issues. If that crypto is being held overseas in an overseas account, now you have a FINCEN requirement and a crypto requirement. So I would be careful with crypto to make sure you do report it, because it is getting reported to the IRS. So they are seeing those transactions.
It is now.
Because I think if you have a wallet that's in New York State, they have to comply with the rules.
Yeah.
And
So
I know there were some that exited New York State because they couldn't.
It is getting reported. So my whole point is, you don't want to mess with the IRS. You want to be compliant and follow the rules, and like anything else, you just don't want them up in your Kool-Aid, because once they get into looking at crypto, while we're here, we're going to go look at everything else, right? So just follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And
So how do these bad actors still do the kidnappings and hey, I'm going to hijack Young and Company's cloud, their server, and I'm going to hold that information hostage, and I'm only going to release it if you pay me 10,000 Bitcoin. That's a non-traceable transaction.
Right. Those guys are probably overseas and not under the jurisdiction of the IRS, those bad actors. I'm sure that's what they're doing. Yeah, and that's why they want the Bitcoin, right? Because that way they can hide under it. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
And it's not even small companies. They're hitting up hospitals. They're hitting up big, very large corporations, and they're paying up the ransom. MGM.
Right. Matter of fact, if you're a business owner in New York State, you better be aware of the SHIELD Act, right? So you've got to make sure you're compliant with, all of those rules. Like for anybody doing tax, there's IRS wants you to have a WISP, basically
What's
make-
that?
making
Wisp?
sure, making sure you have a
Dave's always got a lot of acronyms.
a lot of it. It's a information security
Government
plan,
loves
like a
acronyms.
information security plan, making sure you have everything set up where your employees are trained, making sure you're following the rules, making sure you're buttoned up, for security. There's 2-factor, your resting data is encrypted, that you have your IT department has very good cybersecurity, whatever that might, so you want to make sure you're following the rules, because the IRS is saying, look, you're sitting on all of that PII, the private identifiable information. So you have CPA firm's going to have a person's social security number, bank account information, driver's
That's a lot of
license.
info.
That is.
Right. So
that is.
you want to make sure that that information is protected. I take that extremely seriously. So that, we do our very best, and we have a very high level.
It's not cheap.
And not cheap. I spend significant amounts of money on IT, and specifically on cyber. You got to make sure your employees are trained, and not just once a year. I'm talking as like an ongoing event, making sure they're doing the right thing, and making sure your clients aren't emailing you PII in the email, making sure they're using your portal, and the portals are secure, and they're using difficult passwords with 2-factor. So it sends you have like a 2-factor, sends a push to maybe your cell phone, where you have an app that says, so once you put the username and password, still another factor to get in. So the cybersecurity is extremely big deal. To your point, the bad actors are out there, and they're looking, and they're going to all kinds of tricks, right? They're going to use all kinds of tricks to get in, to try to get into your system, because your weakest link is really the user, right? So the person behind the computer. So you could be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on security, and all they need is someone to click on one link saying, oh yeah, your Amazon package has arrived, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then they click on it, and it's not Amazon. And all of a sudden you have ransomware on your network.
Yeah.
So we take that extremely seriously. We make sure that we tell our clients, you better link up with a good, IT company that does that also has cybersecurity wrapped in, and maybe and actually have an outside third party, right, come and check. So part of the cybersecurity is like we get a report, it's like a SOC report, like an audit. Like, so if we're dealing with a third party, we make sure that third party is also secure. Like they send us their audit, their outside auditor auditing their IT, their cybersecurity. So any vendors that you work with, you've got to vet them to make sure you might have done everything great on your side in your firm, right? But then you're dealing with a third party. Your people handling your IT, people handling your portal, people handling your software, all that. You got to check, and you got to get proof that you've vetted them. It could be as simple as the people, like you have shred bins. Are those shred bins locked up? So the security comes in cybersecurity, but the SHIELD Act gets into administrative. Like someone calls in and says, hey, I'm Dave Georgia. Well, how do we know it's really Dave? You got to vet them, right? Because it could
that was a part of a conversation we had this morning with Jason and Charlie about AI, the use of AI. And it's going to get scary good.
It's
scary good, because you're not going to know if you're talking to me.
Right.
And I'm going to say, Dave, could you drop off that check at so-and-so?
Right.
Yeah, no problem.
Exactly. So that's like an admin. That's an admin support. And physical is when you can kind of get, like, your doors are locked, you have cameras, you have codes to get in, like there's a code, an alarm codes to get in most places, where all your like say your server room, like you have biometrics to get in there. Like it only lets certain people in. It's based on biometrics to get into my, or all that is not, and it's very secure, right? But it could be something as simple as someone calls in and says, hey, I'm this guy. Well, you got to vet that person. How do you know it's that person, right?
Yeah.
Or someone sends you an email and they just put one letter off the real email. Like, how are you going to know? You got to make sure you're dealing with who you think you're dealing with. It is so insidious. It's almost like you have to have a master's class in cybersecurity just to operate a business in today's world.
But you are right, though. Even having the best technology and the best support and the best systems, it always comes down to the weakest link. And Microsoft just got hacked. And it was because of an employee clicking on a link. So they had all these great systems in place to block and defend itself, except you had one person click on something wrong.
Yeah, the human element.
Human element. With that, this is a good place to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the show. Do you want help building and managing an investment portfolio that's right for you? One that will help you maximize growth potential while you're saving, help you generate income when you need it most, and eventually preserve what you've saved to leave to your beneficiaries? We do this day in and day out and take the stress and responsibility of making those decisions off your plate. Subscribe to our newsletter, read our blog post, and listen to our podcast to get a flavor of how we do things. Our firm is unique and capable of handling all your investment and insurance needs. Monarch Wealth Management, our guidance, your future. Welcome back to the Pennywise Financial Podcast. Constantine here, Monarch Wealth Management, my co-host Dave Georgiev, and our guest, the one, the only, Dave Young from Young & Company. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here, guys.
Having a lot of fun.
The groundhog himself, David Young.
Yeah, I'm going to come out and see my shadow. It's going to be 6 more weeks of tax season.
That's the truth, dude.
Please no.
So real quick, Dave, and you got to give us the high level because, you know, you're very intellectual, so you can dive deep and all this stuff. But we want our viewers to be able to stay awake during this, the podcast here. So FINCEN, new rule, new law.
What is it?
Yeah. So
yes.
what the new rule is essentially is beginning January 1st of 2024 until 12/31/24. You have this 1-year window.
Mhm.
In that 1-year window, if you're a small business, defined as essentially less than $5 million in gross receipts, and you have less than 20 employees. So in theory, you could have $10 million in gross receipts, but only 10 employees, right? So you would still do a filing. So
Mhm.
pretty much if you're a small business and you have an entity like an S Corp, a C Corp, or an LLC, that entity needs to do a filing through an organization called FINCEN. It's part of the U.S. Treasury. It's been around for a while. That's been basically looking at foreign bank accounts, making sure you're doing those filing. This year, they want all these businesses to report up to them. And what you're going to report essentially is who the beneficial owner or owners are. That filing is something you need to do yourself or with your lawyer. It's not really something a CPA is supposed to do, but I
Mhm.
want people to be aware of this filing. And essentially what you do, you give them a copy of your passport, driver's license, who the owners are, beneficial owners are.
Wait. So where do they do this? You say you give them.
You do it online.
So
you're
it's
gonna
not
go to the
local,
yeah,
like
you're
a
going to go.
branch? Okay.
Right, you're going to go on their website. You open up an account, and the thing to remember is it's going to be for each entity that you own. So if you have 4 LLCs, it's going to be a filing for each entity.
LLC.
We'll do
Yep.
each entity, each LLC or each entity, and you'll report to FinCEN who are the owners of this entity or the beneficial owners of this entity.
Mhm.
The caveat is you also have to report any changes. So that's where it gets a little, sticky. So if you have
Changes like
changes, could be a change of address. It could be you have
for the business
for the business or
The
the owner.
individual?
Either or.
Right,
Wow.
right. So I can see people missing this filing, right? Not even doing the filing. And oh, by the way, if you don't do the filing, $500 per day penalty. Per day, not just $500 once. We're talking $500 per day. And there's possible criminal charges, which include a couple of years in prison. So this is
You
something
gotta
you
get out of here.
You want to be.
How are they going to enforce that? Let's be real.
Dude,
Yeah.
How are they going to enforce that?
I don't know how, but I don't want to be the guinea pig.
No, me
I
either.
am way too pretty to go to jail. But if
You
I
are,
do
Dave.
go,
You are
if I
pretty.
do go
You
to
are pretty,
jail,
Dave.
So handsome.
I'm
I'm going
gonna-
with pretty, actually.
I'm gonna
Pretty.
beat the biggest guy up in his gang, take over his gang,
That's right.
and maybe I'll have H&R cell block. Who knows? Who knows what I'll do?
Dave will be walking around prison going, Gator, don't play.
Yeah, it'll be like Shawshank Redemption for
There
me.
you go.
So
There you go.
I would tell you that you need to be very aware of this filing. This is something that you don't want to miss. This is something that you would work with your lawyer on, a competent lawyer who knows what he or she is doing, or you can do it yourself. But once you've done the filing, you're done. However, if there's changes, could be a change of the business address, could be a change in beneficial owners, it could be a change in
Yep. You got to
in your address. You
update
have
that.
and I believe it also if let's say you use your driver's license and expired, then you've got to update
Oh,
that.
Come on, that
gosh.
seems a little bit laborious. I mean,
Right. So I think
Why are they doing this, though?
that's
they just
a good
want.
question. It's all about corporate transparency, apparently. So what they're looking for is there's not one system in the United States where, like at the federal level, they're looking for people who are hiding behind these LLC shell companies, maybe doing nefarious things. So I think that's what they're trying to find and look for, like who owns what entities and who might be influencing these
Sure.
entities behind the
So
scenes.
you mean to tell me for the last couple hundred years, this country had no idea who owned a business?
So that's my question
The
is like,
Russians.
it seems like the IRS would know,
I think they do.
Yeah.
but I don't know. This is what, is
know.
coming out. So all I can tell you is there's a reporting requirement. It needs to be done. I would not forget about it. I would reach out
It's a big
to
penalty.
huge penalty, and it's per entity. So those can add
Oh
up
my
quickly,
gosh.
right?
Per day, per entity?
Dude.
Correct. And on top of all that, I have not seen anything coming out from anything from the federal government making people aware of this. So if you're
I
listening
was
to this,
just going to ask you that.
if
How
you're
are
lis-
people finding out about it?
because people, well, we were talking maybe a little earlier offline. What's the advantage of having a CPA? Well, one of the advantages, besides just having, a list of trusted professionals, like we're talking about the financial people, the lawyer, a CPA type of, is this is really, it's nice that you have a CPA who told you. Imagine if you're just the guy going on TurboTax or you're going to some place that no one's ever mentioned it to you.
Mhm.
I mean, I send out a mailing to my client. I gave him a link to the FinCEN. I gave him a nice letter. I sent him the guide, step-by-step guide from FinCEN. Go to the FinCEN website, find a competent lawyer who knows what he or she's doing,
Mhm.
because at least I've told my clients about it. And I found out about it because that's what I do. I listen to a bunch of podcasts similar to this in my field, and I follow all the different tax law updates. But this doesn't fall on the CPAs. This is not a CPA filing. This is a filing that's done by the individual owner or owners of the business through their lawyer. It's a lot like when you formed your LLC or your S corp or whatever you did. You did that through a legal channel. And this is a very similar thing where I can see, though, people not knowing about it, getting missed.
Absolutely.
And then blaming their CPA. I don't know how this kind of even fell in the CPA realm, but I feel like CPAs are the ones talking about this and not
it's not
attorneys.
a tax bill.
But
Right.
it's not attorneys. It's really like
No.
CPAs are like, did you hear about this new rule?
Right.
But think of all the small businesses like the plowing companies, the contractors that got a single member LLC, and they're not going to know about this if they go to TurboTax and
All
just
right.
do it on their own.
Right. That's what I always like now because I'm into football. Now that the Bills are out, I'm watching the remaining two teams.
Who are
but
you
you s-
rooting for? Hey, let's pause here.
Oh, I'm going to go for San Francisco.
Thank you, my friend.
because of
Thank you. Thank you, brother.
My brother, I actually,
No other reason.
I was going to go check in on him after Detroit had him against the ropes. I was going to go.
He was texting me that day.
If
He's like,
done-
it doesn't look good. I'm like, I know, Dave.
If he
I
did, if he
know.
didn't respond to my text, I had a plan to go get him out of his house. And so I am rooting for your team.
Thank you. Thank you.
Because you are one of my best friends. So,
Appreciate that.
but I am deeply, seriously concerned about my clients and the well-being, making sure they're compliant and understand the rules
Mhm.
and at least know what the rules are. I have seen very little, if anything, from the federal government at all, other than putting up a website saying, hey, you have this filing, but not really making people aware of it. So to your point, if you're the guy that goes on TurboTax, God bless you. That's your, fine. That's okay. But if you're sitting on an LLC, we have a lot of clients that own LLCs for the rental properties.
Yeah.
And they'll have a rental property, 2 or 3, maybe in an LLC. But are they aware of the filing? Did anyone tell them? Is TurboTax telling
Do you
people?
think
I don't know.
TurboTax will
I
have some
don't
sort of
know.
announcement?
I have no idea.
doubt it. I doubt it. I doubt
Yeah.
it because it's not a tax thing. It's really a
Oh, you're
legal,
right.
It's
You're right.
really a
You're
legal
right.
filing.
Yeah.
So I would doubt the software companies are going to tell their people about it. I don't know that. I just
yeah.
my gut feeling says that there's been very little information pushed out from the federal government
Mhm.
telling people, making them aware of this. So how are people going to know? That's there's not a lot of information on there.
I got a question for you. So you mentioned the initial filing. Aside from the address change or maybe expired license, is there any other reason to recertify or refile?
Yes. So if let's say you have a change of beneficial owner, right?
Ownership change.
Mm.
Right. And remember the beneficial owner, again, we're getting to some legal work here, but essentially it's defined if you own more than 25% equity, or you could be like a CEO, a CFO.
So if your title changes?
Or let's say you bring in a person and that person could fall into the beneficial owner rules. So that's why it's a legal thing because it's not really tax. So what I would tell you is if you have a change, maybe you bring on a new person or a person leaves, so they get replaced by a new person, or a new person comes on. Now you have a new beneficial owner in the mix, you have to report that. But if you have a big company or a big, say, it's relatively big, you may have 5, 10 partners, and you got to track if one of the partners moved, right? So it's easy. In your case, it's just 2 of you guys. You know where each other
Yeah.
live. But imagine you had 10 partners.
Sure.
And one moved from Brockport to Spencerport.
Yeah.
I mean, would you really know? Would that, and you only have a limited amount of time to do a filing, to give a new change of address for one of your partners.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
one of
here's
your
a question for
beneficial
you guys.
owners, I should say.
They're asking business owners to willingly go in and report and say, I own this company. So you're telling me they didn't know before, right?
Right.
So how are they going to fine and impose a fine on these people that they don't know own the business?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Right? Please tell us where you are.
Yeah.
Because we can't find you to find
Give
you.
us all your information.
But you know what I see is I see they're probably trying to button up some things, some money going in bad places and things like that, not being taxed, and businesses that are shells and bad money moving around. But I see the people getting hurt are the people that own a business that are maybe uninformed or just didn't know about it, negligence. Those are the ones that are going to get hurt.
They're going to get hurt, and they're going to get hurt in a significantly bad way.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think what could happen is the IRS will see the K-1s. Like, so you and Dave have a K-1 from your business. Let's assume you have a K-1. And then the K-1 goes to you and Dave. And let's say the address on the K-1 is different than the one on FINCEN. So do you see what my point is?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you have a partner. The partner moves from, say, Brockport to Spencerport. And then on the K-1, your CPA says, give me the addresses. Oh, I live in Spencerport now. So the K-1 gets reported with Spencerport, but FINCEN saw Brockport on the last filing. I can see that being an issue where they could come out and get you.
I feel like if they want to, like, put you against the wall, they can this way. It's like another way that if they really want to build up a case against you, they go and find some tiny thing that you didn't update on the FINCEN website, and then they kind of nail you to the wall with that as well.
Right. So just something like your driver's license, like one that expires. Are you going to think about it? I don't know. Say expires in 3 years, but you didn't move. Are you going to remember, hey, I got my driver's license expired. Do I have to update my FINCEN? Right.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
But there's so many things you have to do.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's an easy thing. It seems like it's an easy thing. And it conceptually it is. And I understand what the government wants to do, and I get it. But the penalties seem onerous.
Yep.
There's been very little plan to roll this thing out and inform people. And I think if you're going to roll out something with such onerous penalties, you might want to tell people about it as well and notify them. Yeah. So I don't know that maybe that will happen later this year. It's very early in the year. But one thing I would not do is I wouldn't wait till the end of the year to do the filing, because I could only imagine the FINCEN website crashing. And then as an avalanche of people try to get all their filings done that last week of December, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that hard. I mean, like you said, you have the information ready. You go in and you do it.
You do it, and make sure you keep a copy of that receipt.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That you've done the filing. And I would do it early, and I would be aware of what the rules are, and I would make sure you do it with a lawyer. That way you have at least some protection that you did your best effort. You engaged a professional who knew what he or she was doing.
When does the clock start? So like January next year, do they say, hey, you haven't filed, we're going to start day by day?
Right.
Is it 2025, January 1?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
However, if you do a new filing, so let's say you do a new filing this year, let's say you formed a new LLC in 2024, then you, I believe, have 90 days, I think, to file. So if you formed an LLC, shorter window, right? So also, let's say you and Dave let's say you already made your filing, just as an example, let's just assume you did. You made your filing, let's say today, but then Dave moves from Brockport to Spencerport next week.
Here.
Now you got, I think this year you have 90 days. Again, you got to
from the change.
Do you see what I'm saying? So you got to read the rules, because I've read the rules, but the rules keep changing. So,
of course they do.
Right. So, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not holding myself out as a lawyer. So that's why I say contact a lawyer. But if you have a change, that clock, to your point, starts right when that's changed, when you did that filing. So right now, if you and Dave did a filing and then one of you move, you're on a 90-day clock. But that $500 per penalty. So if Dave moves from Brockport to Spencerport, in 91 days, that $500 penalty starts accruing, right? So you've got to make that update.
Can I move back now?
Yeah, you can move back to Brockport now.
Thanks.
So those are the things where I think will trip people up, because these are things that people are completely ballistically
unaware of.
Right?
Agreed. And can we say when this all goes bad, we could just blame Kevin
Yeah, we're gonna blame somebody.
Kevin who?
Johnson?
Oh,
Yeah, we're gonna blame somebody, but it won't be the CPAs.
oh no.
I've been preaching from the hilltops about
Yes.
informing people
you
about
have.
this way back in the day when you and Kevin were saying, "What are you talking about? Just let them go. Just let them go."
Yeah. Big D, can we transition a little bit? And I actually want to just take a couple minutes and talk about your military career, because before you were a CPA, you were bad to the bone, U.S. Army. So what was your rank?
So I was actually at the same time I was in the reserves, so I was doing it in parallel. So I was I started off as a private in the infantry. I was actually 11 Charlie, was a mortar man, and I ended up as a lieutenant colonel.
Lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, when I retired out, I was a lieutenant colonel,
Wow.
and I was civil affairs, PSYOPs, information.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
for your
service.
service.
But I
Yes,
did.
absolutely.
So I went to Afghanistan right after 9/11 with the
Really?
401st, right out here, right out of Rochester. A group of us went over to Afghanistan. We were with 10th Mountain,
Really?
and then the 82nd. Yeah,
How crazy was
that was pretty
Afghanistan?
crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got
At
into
that
it?
time, it was brand new, right? So we were the first reservists there, amongst the first military there, right? So
Yeah.
we were there pretty early on.
Back when the country was patriotic still.
Still, correct. So that was a unique time.
Yeah.
A time to be in the service. It was an interesting time, that's for sure. So that was
How long were you in Afghanistan for?
I was deployed for about a year. We were in Afghanistan just over 9 months, 9 months and a week, 9 months and right around 9 months,
Yeah.
right roughly.
You weren't married yet, right?
No, I was married at that time. I was married, and then at the time we got 2-year orders because we were the first reservists in that first group of reservists. They didn't know how long so we didn't know when we left. We didn't know how long we're going to be gone for. Right? You don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
Like we got orders that says 2 years.
Yeah.
So they finally, when we were there, because the active duty guys left after 6 months, and we're like, okay, but what about us? We're like, oh, we're still working on that. I'm like, okay, so it could be another year and a half. We didn't know. So it turned out while we were there, they said, okay, you're going to be gone a year. You're going to be in country 9 months. And then we came back and got, mobilized. And then they got mobilized again, right? I got another year. So I went twice.
You went back?
Actually, I was going back to Iraq or Afghanistan, and I ended up in Haiti and that's, I was already trained up on, I did civil affairs and PSYOPs, and then and then there was something called information operations. I got all those credentials. And then, so my guys had to go through some training, but I didn't. I already had the credential. So they actually sent me to Haiti for what was supposed to be like a short-term 6-week mission to set up a rewards program. And I ended up staying in Haiti for about a year because my rewards program ended up working very well. So they left me there.
When was that? What year was that?
05.
05?
05,
What were you
06.
doing what was the mission? I don't know what you can explain, like in Haiti.
In Haiti, it was mostly what I can talk about there was enhancing their security.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like their military security?
U.S. Our U.S. working with the Haitian government. Security like that to help improve the security of Haiti at the time. So it was more of that type of mission. So I had a mission. What I was doing was working. So they just left me there, helping with the general security of the embassy and Haiti in general and U.S. forces. There was no U.S. forces, but just U.S. personnel's there.
Yeah.
Making sure that to the degree we can keep Haiti a less dangerous place. That was one of the things I worked on.
Yeah. And then from that, Dave, that's kind of springboarded into the work you ended up doing in Haiti?
Right. Yeah. So while I was there, I ended up working with a couple of nonprofit, NGOs in Haiti. And then
what's an NGO?
Non-government organization.
Yeah.
Non-government organization. And so
it's funny, outside the US, everybody, that's what they call them. Like nonprofits. Is it right. It's like, oh, the NGO.
So I worked with a couple of them there, and I really got a heart for Haiti when I was there, and I ended up adopting a couple of kids from Haiti. Then after I left Haiti, when my time was done, I left. But I got back involved again. I had set up a school in Haiti, helped get a school going, and it was sadly right near where the earthquake was in an area in Port-au-Prince.
Yep.
And we lost most of our students and had a lot of displaced people. And so then that started a journey of me setting up an organization in the U.S. to help, educate the people. And then we had these kids that didn't have families, where they were essentially orphaned. So we put them in family groups because I believe that the kids are better off not in an orphanage, but better off in a family group. But we had to help get them and set up in a family group. And we're still working with the kids. They're starting to age out now because they were little kids then, but it's been years. So now we've educated a whole group of kids, had a couple of schools. We set up a program, essentially like a micro loan program where we seated women essentially because they're kind of holding the family unit together with small amount of money, like $65, $70, and they pay that money back. And it's something as simple as they go out, you give them some seed money, and they go out and buy a case of, let's say, water, and they could just I'll use dollars instead of goods, and they can buy it for like $12. But they could sell it for say $24, right? So as long as they retain $12 back, and they could go the next day to the depot and buy another case, and they could have $12 of gross profit.
It's like a little business.
Like a little business.
Yeah.
So we seeded many micro businesses, and then for each woman we set, she can take care of about 5 people, whether it's their kids or grandkids. So that was self-sustaining. So that was another thing. And then we have a widows program because there's no government in Haiti, there's no social security. So we have a program where the widows are sort of getting taken care of, and then it's basically the kids. We put them back in family groups. We educate those kids. I have a person that goes making sure they're going to school, making sure someone's helping them get tutored and going through school. And then we have the schools we work with a little bit because we're trying to phase out a little bit because part of now in Haiti, we can't get down there because it's so dangerous. So
that's what I was going to ask you, Dave, is how is the current conditions?
It's very bad. So you can't really go there because if I go there now, what I'll do is I'll bring more danger to the people because if they see me show up, they're going to say an outsider, right? So they'll go and try to kidnap. If I go visit a school, or I go visit one of the family groups where the kids are, I go visit one of our micro loan program people. If they see me interact with those people, even if I don't get kidnapped myself, those people are in danger because the kidnappers will see an outsider and say, well, that person has a connection to somebody with means or money.
Resources, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So it's very dangerous for me to go there for them. So for that reason, if I do go there, I have to meet them sort of clandestinely in a place where nobody can see them or me.
Oh, that's a shame.
So
That's crazy.
yeah,
It
it's
is.
not.
When did the
safe place.
president get assassinated?
It's been a couple of years now.
Yeah. Isn't that nuts?
Yeah.
And so who's the leader now?
They took the old prime minister is still there is no functioning government now. So it's sort of like a
Free
It's
for
free
all?
for all.
yeah,
Oh my
it's like
gosh.
it's like Mad Max. It's
No.
really it's insane.
Wow.
It's the gangs control big parts of the country. There's roadblocks,
Yeah.
and they'll try to extort money from you or kidnap you.
That's
It's
kind of
not
like Mexico now too with
Yeah.
the drug cartels and stuff.
It's like that. Yeah,
It's
it's
been
not a
going on for like the
it's not a
last
place
25
that
years.
yeah, it's not a safe place to be,
Yeah.
and it's very difficult because I care about the people, and with the technology, I can interface with them. I can use apps to video chat with them and see them and talk with them, but they're in dire straits there because there's without security, it's hard to have anything else. If
Yeah.
you don't have security, you don't really have a rule of law, then it's difficult to, maintain any degree of like stability
Order.
where there's
Wow.
no
Law and
very
order.
little, or there's
You're
no
doing
order.
great work there. Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thank you for everything you're doing there in Haiti. It's a lot. I've got a question for you. So, how did you transition from this badass guy serving, and then you've got a soft place in your heart to go on and do this great work, and then you're doing taxes,
Yeah, so I
which
was
is like
doing
zero fun.
zero fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, zero fun. Yeah, so it's just came to me. I think I used some of my skills I learned in the military. That helped for me to set up the mission in Haiti because it's a lot of the tasks are transferable, right? You just have a vision and how you're going to get there and how is it going to work. And
Yeah. Implementation.
yeah, right. So that's something you learned when I learned when I was in the military. So it's really taking those skills and transferring, and really even transferring into running a CPA firm isn't much different than that as far as having a vision and how you're going to have procedures and how you're going to have, essentially a vision and how you're going to get there and what steps it takes to get to that vision. Those are all transferable skills. As far as the mission in Haiti, I think that was more God centric than me. I think God just laid it on my heart to have. This is what, sort of here's something for you to do. Here's something you can do in this lane here.
But you did it.
And then, right. So I did it, which was not easy at the time. I went there after the earthquake. It was horrible. I mean, it was so much destruction. It's almost unimaginable. It's hard to describe it. It was so horrible to see the level of destruction. I can't even put it into words. It's just mound after mound of just gray, like rubble, just down. And when I was there pre-earthquake, I knew how to get around because I could go by the landmarks because there aren't road signs, right? And your GPS isn't going to tell you where to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I just knew by landmarks, turn here, go this way. Because in Haiti, I did have a driver when I was there, but I never trusted my driver. I drove, right? So I knew because I was always wondering, well,
were you paying this driver?
Yeah, but how do you know if
he
someone
just sat there while you drove?
Right, but he could be an interpreter too.
Okay.
Right, and then if
how do you know he's not trying to
it's like a Swiss Army knife.
Lure
he's
you.
Your interpreter.
Right, exactly.
Your guide.
Because I knew
he's a spoon.
I knew how the gang guys were kidnapping people, right? So I know they would pay off the security guards, right? So the security guards would tell because they're high value targets. So how do I know this guy's not been, possibly breached by a bad guy? So I'm gonna be the driver.
Yeah. I'm the captain now.
Yeah, I know where I'm going. I'm gonna learn. I learned like 5 or 6 or 10 different ways away. So if this road is blocked, I can get out of that situation and find a different road or go a different way. So I learned all the ways to get around very easily. Well, I say not easily, but at least I knew how to get from point A to point B in more than one way to avoid dangerous must.
Talk about not having your back to the exit. Like you had to be. I mean, you're doing all this great work, and you have to be conscious of what's going on around you.
Hostile
who might attack you.
Yeah, because they'll kidnap you. Because you're. Especially when I was there was a whole lot of kidnappings, right? So that was very popular.
Worst mistake they make, kidnapping Dave.
Yeah. They might return
Are you guys ready?
Right. You don't know.
Davey,
so
if we could summarize though, like we got to get back to taxes because that's why we have you here, big guy. For people at home that don't know you, don't know your company, how do they learn more about you? How do they get a hold of you?
I think the easiest way is they could just send me an email. I'm dyoung@youngandcompany.net, or just call my office. Calling might be even easier because I'll be getting pretty busy these days, which is 585-427-0210. And then, Ann or Debbie, someone will answer the phone and just, ask for me.
What about the website?
And then go to my website, which is youngandcompany.net.
Young and Company. And I'll make sure I have links in the description.
Right. I would encourage people to make sure they're aware of that. Like I said, the Corporate Transparency Act is something that I want to make sure people are aware of. So, link up with your CPA. If you have a CPA, stay with your CPA. Be good. I'm not, looking to steal anybody.
Sure.
But if you don't have a relationship with somebody and you're a small business owner, this might be the year to find somebody. There are so many changes you need to be aware of. It's best to have a good team of people you can work with that understand what's going on around you so you can have some protection for yourself.
Dave, who's your ideal client? Are you doing both individual returns as well as business or?
Yeah, I work with mostly business clients and higher or complex returns. Like I do a lot of returns that may have multiple K1s. It may have a bunch of different moving pieces and parts. Maybe they have a rental property. Maybe they have a small business. Maybe they have some tax planning needs going on. So they could have a bunch of things. So the rentals get confusing because there's all kinds of different rules around that. On the rental, how many rentals do you have? Do you qualify for this 20% deduction for QBI? On small businesses, same thing. There's a bunch of rules out there that people aren't completely unaware of. New York actually has a nice positive one. If you have a small business, grocery receipts are less than 1.5 million. And you have some employees. New York gives you a little bit of a 15% deduction on your tax return. But again, it's a lot of things that people don't know about. So I would tell you that whatever CPA you go with, that person will save you most likely. Whatever you pay that person will be saved in just aggravation, in tax mitigation, and compliance. So that's what I would encourage people with. Even if it's not me, just find a CPA out there that you're comfortable with that matches your personality and how your work style. It's most important to have a good group, and you need a CPA, a lawyer, and a financial person, just like you and Dave. That's what you need. And if you don't have that, I encourage folks to find a person. CPAs are hard to find these days, so I would find one as quickly as you can that you're comfortable working with.
Love it.
Said. Yeah.
That's a good summary. Thanks again. I think this is all the time we have for today's show. Thanks again for listening to the Pennywise Financial Podcast. Constantine here at Monarch Wealth Management with our guest today, Dave Young from Young and Company.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Pennywise Financial, brought to you by Monarch Wealth Management. Constantine and David really care about their clients. They want to make sure you're happy, so you'll continue to hire them. There's no commitments, and clients are free to leave whenever they want. Think about being able to pick up the phone and call someone for guidance and advice on almost anything, from buying a car, selling a home, buying vacation properties, or even selling a business. Reach out on the website at monarchwealthmanagement.com. There are 2 offices in Rochester and 2 offices in Buffalo. Reach out to us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, or call us toll-free at 800-480-1580. That's 800-480-1580. Until next time, this is Pennywise Financial signing off.
The opinions voiced in this program are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial advisor or tax advisor prior to investing. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, and SIPC.